Diaries are one of the earliest literary genres. We have remains of diaries from ancient Egypt where somebody recorded day by day what it took to transport stones and how long it took to build and so on. So it is a really personal record of one man's work. Diaries become more intimate and, in a sense, more artificial as time goes by. Because what does it mean to write a diary? It means that day by day, you apply your memory to what has happened during the last 24 hours and tell it to the page. Why do we do that? Well, sometimes it is a real honest way of recording what you went through throughout the day, what you thought, what you did, in order to preserve that memory so that it will be useful for you later. A way of speaking to your previous self. Literature is, in that sense, a time machine because it allows us to speak beyond borders and beyond the actual moment of what we did in the past, what we experienced in the past. But diaries that are written deliberately bear in mind, consciously or subconsciously, the reader. As we were saying, that reader might be the writer, him or herself, who wants to revisit the past and know who that person was and what that person did that was there before, incarnated in a previous moment. But sometimes, consciously or unconsciously, it is written for someone that you don't know behind the page, on the other side of the page. That reader in the future who might want to discover what the experience of today was. That writer in the future is invited into your private realm to inspect what you thought, what you did, and to judge it, because every reader is a judge. So consciously or unconsciously, we put on the page our thoughts, but at the same time, we censor them. It is rare to have a diary such as the Diary of Pepys in the 17th century in England, recording at the same time personal events and public events like the Fire of London. We have a record of that experience, of that tremendous catastrophe. And Pepys also records his sexual adventures. For whom is he recording that? We readers in the 21st century can judge Pepys as an amorous adventurer or somebody who brags of his sexual conquests, but at the same time, it allows us to perceive an attitude in that remote century of someone that we only know through what that person decided to leave for us. So diaries can take on different aspects, different forms, different styles. One of the oldest diaries we have is an Arabic diary from the 12th century, 11th century, Al-Banna's diary in Baghdad, talking about political matters and about religious matters. There is some private questions discussed in the diary. We only have fragments of the diary, but it's very interesting because it allows us to perceive what life in Baghdad in the 11th century was. Diaries can also become a way of creating a character for the future. There are diaries that smack of something artificial. And so the diaries of Anais Nin, for instance, with their amorous explaining of her sexual life, seem to a reader in the 21st century somebody who is showing off. There are diaries that are less private diaries, personal diaries, than diaries that record the life of someone else. Adolfo Bioy Casares in Argentina, when he was 17, he met the 33-year-old Borges, and they established a friendship that would last until Borges's death. So it is fantastically interesting to read Bioy's diaries. Bioy's diaries have been edited by his literary executor, Martino, and they constitute a volume of more than 1,500 pages. But there, Bioy records day after day his meetings with Borges, other things as well. But for the 21st century reader, what is most interesting is to perceive not only that relationship of Bioy Casares with Borges, but Borges, the character, the intellectual, the great reader, seen from outside, because Borges has written much about his way of reading and his way of looking at literature, but it is a literary construct. We don't need to believe that this is the real Borges who is speaking. But on the other hand, in Bioy's diary, we perceive a different Borges, a much more open Borges, a humorous Borges that is, of course, in his work, but a Borges who allows himself to change his mind, because a writer, when he writes an essay on Flaubert, for instance, well, he expresses his opinion on Flaubert and writes what he believes is a possible reading of Flaubert. But normally, a reader will change that opinion many times throughout a life, and sometimes even throughout the day. And what is extraordinary in Bioy's diary is Bioy's ability to record that on Monday, Borges says that Flaubert is a great writer. On Tuesday, Borges says he's an abominable writer who wrote Salammbô, which is a historical pastiche in Borges's eyes, and then afterwards recovers some other aspect of Flaubert. So the multiplicity of readers that exists in all of us are revealed in something like Bioy's diary. Bioy had an extraordinary memory. He could have a conversation with you and experience the events of the day. And at the end of the day, every day, he obliged himself to sit down and write. And his memory was so extraordinary that he could reproduce the conversations very exactly. And it's fascinating to read the diary, because we hear not only Bioy Casares' voice, but the voice of Borges. And the voice of Borges changing inflection, changing opinions, changing moods, because Borges could become very angry and sometimes very melancholy and sometimes very humorous. And to have such a detailed, kaleidoscopic portrait of an extraordinary character such as Borges is a wonder. So diaries serve that purpose as well, not only as a self-portrait, but as a portrait of others. There are diaries that record not only the personal experience of the writer, not only the experience of the writer's friends, but a portrait of the times. One of the most astonishing diaries is a diary kept by a linguist, a German linguist, during the Third Reich. Victor Klemperer decided to stay in Berlin. His marriage was considered a half marriage because his wife wasn't Jewish, he was Jewish. And Klemperer decides to record day by day the limitations on private life and the changes in vocabulary. This is extraordinary because what we experience today, for instance, and experience that something is forbidden, or next day something no longer takes place, and then the next week something else happens. Reading Klemperer's diary, you can see a progress in the advance of the fascistic Nazi thought, and how it's implemented and how it becomes ingrained in the population. This is something extraordinarily useful for us today because we tend not to notice in the avalanche of disasters that are being thrown at us daily, how they affect our own behavior. Self-censorship, for instance, care not to say certain things in certain contexts, be wary of certain people whom we trusted before, and above all, a much more subtle thing, the changes in language. Klemperer records how certain words change their meaning in the political discourse and then filter down to everyday talk. And it's not only in the political discourse, but in jokes, for instance. He records certain jokes that are allowed or disallowed. He records certain observations of everyday life that become common and would be outrageous at another time. And this is important for us at every point to observe and know whether it is the 20th or the 21st century. I remember going back to Argentina during the military dictatorship and being able to observe these changes in language, which I in turn recorded in my own diary. So, for instance, at a certain point, my brother says to me, speaking about sort of country bumpkin, somebody not very bright, "Oh, he's an honest man." So honest has become, or had become at the time, a designation for somebody who wasn't wily, wasn't clever, wasn't able to find loopholes to survive. Honest was a term of disparagement. My diaries are very erratic. I have kept diaries on and off, but they're less formal diaries than notebooks. I write down a stray thought. I write down a quotation, something like the English Commonplace book, which was a personal anthology of quotations. I write down things to do or phone numbers or addresses. So it's a mishmash of things. But when I go through them, I can find out where I was and what I did at a certain point. I'm very distracted in that sense. I don't have much of a sense of time or place. I have to think twice to say where I am now and what I'm doing. So this sort of diary for me even if it's very erratic, allows me to have a record of my life that's useful in two ways, to remember where I was and what I did, but also certain stray thoughts that will win their way eventually into an essay, perhaps. I have a way of thinking that is anything but straightforward. I allow myself to be distracted by anything. My mind is a sort of little Red Riding Hood that can't find or doesn't want to take the straight path to her grandmother's house and gets distracted by picking berries or listening to the birds. And of course, the danger is that you will meet the big bad wolf. But I think that writing is taking the risk of meeting the big bad wolf and confronting the big bad wolf with words and not allowing it to devour you, but to devour it instead and put it on the page, translated into words. So my idea of diary is a mirror that reflects both ways, inwards and outwards. And I enjoy reading and writing diaries very much.